Welcome. We are glad you are here with us. We have just a massive stack of research, articles, and scientific studies in front of us today.
We do.
And the topic is one that feels incredibly familiar, and yet, when you really look at it, is frustratingly elusive. We are talking about happiness.
It's the single most universal pursuit. I think it's safe to say that almost every human action is in some way calculated to produce happiness.
Or at least avoid its opposite.
Or avoid its opposite, exactly. And yet, as we look through all these materials, what strikes me is how difficult it is to actually pin down what we're even talking about. It's not just one thing.
Exactly. You would think that for something we all want so badly, we'd have a clear definition for it. But the source material suggests we're actually talking about several different things at once. So we're going to try to do something, well, a little ambitious here. We want to conduct an impartial, comprehensive examination of happiness. We're not just looking for, 5 ways to smile more.
No.
We're analyzing the mechanics, the history, the biology, and the philosophy of human well-being.
That really is the mission. We need to move beyond the simple idea of joy, which is, a fleeting feeling, and understand happiness as this complex emotional and cognitive phenomenon.
And there's a fascinating conflict in the literature between feeling happy in the moment and evaluating your life as happy. Two very different concepts.
And we're going to see how biology, culture, and philosophy all intersect to shape that well-being.
We have a lot of ground to cover. We're going to look at the difficulty of defining it, the problem of measuring it, because how do you even measure a feeling?
A huge problem.
Then there's the biological baseline, including genetics, and this paradox of the pursuit itself. Why does trying to be happy, often make people miserable?
It's a paradox that shows up again and again in the research. But let's start at the beginning, or maybe I should say the linguistic quagmire.
Yes.
We need to define our terms.
Let's unpack this. The word happiness itself seems to be part of the problem. It's described in the text as a fuzzy concept.
Or a polyseme.
What does that mean exactly?
It just means it's a word with multiple meanings. So if I say I'm happy, I could mean 2 very different things.
Okay.
And researchers, philosophers, they generally divide this into 2 primary factors. First, there's what they call affect.
Affect.
This is the current experience of emotion. It's pleasure, it's joy, it's the answer to the question, how do I feel right now?
So the in-the-moment feeling.
Exactly. The Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, he defines this side of happiness as what I experience here and now. It's purely experiential.
Okay, so that's the feeling. It's the sensory input of the moment. But then there's the second factor, which seems to be where all the complexity comes in.
Yes, and that's life satisfaction. This is an appraisal. It's a judgment call on the quality of your life.
So it's not a feeling.
Not directly. It's cognitive. It's not about how you feel this second, but an overall appreciation of one's life as a whole. Ruth Veenhoven defines it in almost exactly those words.
So it requires you to kind of step back and look at the big picture of your life.
Precisely. You have to evaluate it.
This distinction creates a really interesting situation, which is the paradox of misery and happiness. The philosophical argument presented here is that a person can have a happy life.
A good life, yeah.
Based on good things happening or achieving things, even if they were often miserable in the moment.
It sounds like a total contradiction, but it makes perfect sense when you separate the two. You could be working on a grueling project that makes you stressed and tired every single day, so your affect is low.
Right. You feel bad.
You feel bad. But if you believe that work is deeply meaningful, your life satisfaction could be through the roof.
And the opposite could be true.
Oh, absolutely. Someone could be experiencing moment-to-moment pleasure, just constant entertainment, but feel their life is completely empty and meaningless. Low life satisfaction.
And this plays out in the global data, too. There's a fascinating geographic split mentioned in the research that really highlights this whole linguistic confusion.
This is one of the most illuminating data points we came across. When you look at these global surveys, Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, they often score the highest on what's called subjective well-being.
Which is more about satisfaction.
Exactly. Those surveys are often leaning toward life satisfaction, the evaluation component. They measure things like stability, safety, economic security.
Okay, so how your life looks on paper, in a way.
In a way, yes. But then if you look at affect-based surveys, which ask about experiencing positive emotions on a daily basis. Did you laugh yesterday? Did you feel joy?
A completely different picture emerges.
A completely different picture. South American countries often score much higher on those.
That is incredible. So you might rate your life as an 8 out of 10 in a Nordic country because society is stable and your needs are met.
Hmm.
But you might actually laugh and smile more day to day in a South American country.
Precisely. It all depends on what you're measuring. Are you measuring the stability and the evaluation of the life or the frequency of positive emotions?
There's also a distinction in the research made by Michaela Suma regarding joy versus happiness.
Yes, she argues that joy is tied to a specific process or a moment. It accompanies an event, it has an object.
So joy is, I am eating this great meal, and happiness is, I have lived a good year.
Essentially, yes. In her view, happiness is that evaluative stance on a period of life or life as a whole. It's a judgment, not just a sensation.
And because these are all internal states, measuring them must be a nightmare for scientists.
It is. Which brings us right to the history of trying to quantify this stuff.
We've been trying to measure this for a very long time. Jeremy Bentham, back in 1780, he proposed measuring happiness.
Bentham was a utilitarian, a famous one. He believed that happiness was the primary goal of humans.
Right, the greatest good for the greatest number.
And that we should measure it to judge how well a government was performing. If the aggregate happiness goes up, the government is doing a good job. He imagined this sort of calculus for felicity.
A calculus for felicity.
Where you could literally sum up all the pleasure and subtract all the pain to get a net score for a society.
So how do we do it today? It seems we still have to rely heavily on self-reporting.
We do. We basically just ask people, how happy are you? But self-reporting is, as you can imagine, incredibly prone to cognitive bias.
How so?
Well, the research highlights something called the peak end rule. This is the finding that our memories of felt emotions are often, well, they're inaccurate.
So we don't remember things correctly?
We don't. We tend to remember two things from an experience. The most intense moment, the peak, and the very end of the experience. We pretty much forget the duration.
So if I have a 2-week vacation that is mostly pleasant, but I have a truly terrible flight home on the last day, I might remember the whole trip as being bad.
Exactly. The miserable ending can retroactively ruin the memory of the whole 2 weeks. And the reverse is true.
Okay.
A painful medical procedure that has a gentle, tapering ending is remembered as less painful than a shorter procedure that stops abruptly while the pain is still high.
And we're also bad at, what's it called, effective forecasting.
Oh, we are notoriously poor at that. We are terrible at predicting how happy future events will make us. We think winning the lottery will change everything forever.
Or that a breakup will ruin us forever.
And usually neither is true to the extent that we imagine. We adapt.
Despite all these flaws, researchers have developed some specific scales to try and get around them. The Cantrell ladder is one I see mentioned a lot.
The Cantrell ladder is used in the Big World Happiness Report. It's a visualization tool. You're asked to imagine a ladder where the top rung 10 is the best possible life for you.
And the bottom 0 is the worst.
Right. And then you're asked, on which step of the ladder do you personally feel you stand at this time? It's very cognitive. It forces you to compare your reality to your ideal.
Then there's a subjective happiness scale, the SHS.
That one's a bit different. It asks you to characterize yourself as a happy or an unhappy individual relative to other people. It's more about your identity. Do you see yourself as a happy person?
And what about the PANIS?
The PANIS, that's the positive and negative act schedule that gets more granular. It measures specific feelings like excited or upset and asks you to rate them for this moment versus, say, the past year. It separates the immediate from the long term.
And the Gal Positive Experience Survey. That one seems to get closer to that South American result we talked about earlier.
It does, because Gallup asks about specific recent experiences. Did you laugh or smile a lot yesterday? Did you feel well rested? Did you learn something interesting?
So it's about the texture of daily life.
Exactly, not the grand evaluation. And in 2018, Paraguay and Panama led the world on that metric.
It's just so interesting how the answer changes depending on the question you ask.
It's everything. And there's a shift happening among economists, too. They're moving away from just using GDP as a proxy for how well a country is doing.
Because money isn't everything.
They're finally realizing that money doesn't capture the full picture. So they're developing these multidimensional dashboards. They want to combine subjective indicators, how people say they feel, with objective ones.
Like what?
Things like autonomy, fairness, community, health. You can't just look at income. You have to look at the context in which that income is earned and spent.
Speaking of context, let's look at the biological context.
Yeah.
How much of this is just hardwired into us from birth?
a huge question.
The source material brings up a breakdown by Sonja Lyubomirsky that I feel like I've heard cited before.
Oh, this is a very famous estimation in the world of positive psychology. Lyubomirsky proposed that roughly 50% of our happiness level is genetically determined.
50%, that's a huge number.
It's massive. Then 10% is determined by life circumstances, which is surprisingly low to many people.
Wait, only 10% is life circumstances. So whether I'm rich or poor, married or single, living in a big house or a small apartment, all of that only accounts for 10%.
That's the theory. The idea is that humans adapt very, very quickly to their circumstances. We'll get to the hedonic treadmill later. So the external stuff matters a lot less than we think.
So what's the last 40%?
The last 40% is subject to self-control or intentional activity. Your habits, your mindset, the things you actively choose to do.
Okay, but we have to be careful with that genetics part. There was a debate for a while about a specific happiness gene.
Yes, the SLC6A4 gene. For a while, early beliefs were that it predicted happiness levels, but a 2016 study by Minkoff and Bond found that, well, it just wasn't a good predictor at all.
So there isn't a single switch in our DNA that just makes us happy.
No, it's far more complex. While some studies on twins suggest heritability of happiness as a personality trait could be as high as 70 to 90%.
That's even higher.
It is, but other genotype studies put it much, much lower, around 12 to 18%. So the general consensus sort of hovers somewhere between 20 and 50%.
So it's significant, but it's not destiny.
That's the key takeaway. Genetics might give you a baseline, a set point, but they do not dictate your moment-to-moment experience.
And there are also physical correlates in the brain itself. The text mentions the right precuneus area.
Yes. Studies have found a positive relationship between the volume of gray matter in the right precuneus and a person's subjective happiness scores. It suggests there is a real structural component to how we process this state.
And this all links to physical health.
It does.
We often hear that happy people live longer. Is that actually true?
It's nuanced. The research indicates that happiness does not necessarily predict longevity in populations that are already sick.
So being happy won't, say, cure a terminal illness.
Correct. But in healthy populations, happiness does predict longevity. It seems to have a protective effect, helping to maintain health rather than restore it once it's already lost.
Okay, so let's move from the hardware of the brain into the software, the psychology of this. Once we get past the biology, how do we psychologically construct happiness? The text brings up Maslow and the concept of flow.
Maslow's hierarchy is the classic pyramid model. You satisfy your basic needs, food, safety, and then you can move up toward what he called self-actualization.
And peak experiences.
Right, these moments of profound understanding and rapture. This dovetails perfectly with Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow.
Flow is when you're so zoned in on what you're doing that the whole world just disappears, right?
That's it, exactly. You become so engaged in a task that time and, crucially, your sense of self, your self-consciousness, they just vanish. Csikszentmihalyi argues that achieving happiness often comes from this state. It's not about relaxing on a beach. It's about intense, meaningful engagement with a challenge that perfectly matches your skill level.
This connects to something called self-determination theory.
This is a crucial theory in modern psychology. It argues that intrinsic motivation, that's doing things because you genuinely want to, not because you have to, relies on satisfying three core psychological needs.
And what are they?
First is competence, feeling effective at what you do. Second is autonomy, having a sense of freedom and choice. And third is relatedness, having warm, close relationships.
I find the point about autonomy really interesting. The research from Ronald Inglehart suggests that once a society meets its basic needs, like food and shelter, the extent of free choice in that society is what really starts to impact happiness levels.
It makes complete sense. If you have food and shelter but absolutely no say in how you live your life, your well-being just caps out. Freedom becomes the next necessary nutrient for happiness.
And meaningfulness is another major component. We have to talk about Viktor Frankl.
We do. Viktor Frankl's story is just incredible. He was a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps.
And his observations there form the basis of his entire philosophy.
Yes. His observation in the camps was that the people who lost hope, who lost a sense of meaning or purpose, they often died very, very quickly. It wasn't just about physical survival.
But those who held on to some kind of meaning tended to survive.
They did. He argued that our response to suffering was a choice, that joy and misery were more about our perspective than our actual surroundings.
He listed three main sources of meaning. What were they?
First, creating a work or doing a deed. having a project. Second was love, or encountering another person in a meaningful way. And the third, and this is the most profound one,
Yes.
finding meaning in unavoidable suffering.
How does one do that?
By changing your attitude toward it. Seeing suffering as a sacrifice for a cause or as an opportunity for inner growth, that reframing is what gives you power.
It's such a profound shift from happiness is feeling good to happiness is having a reason to exist, even when things feel bad.
That is the exact shift that Martin Seligman made when he founded the field of positive psychology. For a long time, psychology was all about mental illness, about taking people from, say, -5 back to 0.
Curing disorders.
Curing disorders. Seligman argued we should also be studying flourishing, how to go from 0 to +5, how to build a good life.
And he developed the PERMA model to explain this.
Yes, PERMA is an acronym for the 5 building blocks he identified for well-being. P is for positive emotion. E is for engagement. That's the concept of flow we just talked about.
Okay.
R is for relationships. M is for meaning, a la Viktor Frankl, and A is for accomplishment.
And he also identified 6 key virtues.
Right. Wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. The idea is that cultivating these virtues is the practical path to a flourishing life, to achieving PERMA.
Now here's where it gets really, really interesting for me. The paradoxes. We have all these theories on how to get happy, but the research suggests that actively trying to get happy can actually backfire.
This is one of the most critical sections of our analysis, I think. We have to start with the hedonic treadmill.
Oh.
This concept helps explain why that 10% for life circumstances is so low. Humans adapt to almost everything.
So you get a raise at work.
You're happy for a while, but then you just get used to it. Your expectations rise, your lifestyle inflates, and you return to your original baseline of happiness. You're just on a treadmill, running faster, but staying in the same place.
Freud actually had a take on this, didn't he?
He did. Freud argued that we derive intense enjoyment only from contrast, not from a steady state. We need the cold to appreciate the warmth. If it's always warm, it just becomes normal.
And then there's the backfire effect.
Yeah.
The research by Iris Mouse shows that striving for happiness can lead to disappointment.
It's a cruel irony. If you set happiness as your explicit goal, you inevitably set these really high standards for how you think you should feel.
Right.
So you're at a birthday party and you're thinking, I should be ecstatic right now, but you're not, so you feel like you're failing at being happy, which makes you unhappy.
You're monitoring your own emotions too closely.
Way too closely. And June Gruber also argues that happiness can have a negative side. It can trigger riskier behaviors.
How so?
When we're really happy, we can become more gullible. We might make rash financial decisions or even become insensitive to the suffering of other people.
The research also mentions that psychological well-being is often higher for people who experience both positive and negative emotions.
Yes, emotional diversity matters. A rich emotional life is not one that is happy all the time. You need to be able to process the full spectrum of human experience. If you suppress the negative to chase the positive, you end up psychologically fragile.
Then there is synthetic happiness. This is Daniel Gilbert's concept, and it's fascinating.
It's a game changer. Gilbert challenges the idea that we have to get what we want in order to be happy. He talks about our psychological immune system.
Why is that?
It's our brain's ability to reframe our world to make us feel better. When we don't get what we want, we lose the job, we get rejected, we manufacture happiness.
We tell ourselves stories.
We tell ourselves stories. Well, that job would have been too stressful anyway, or, that relationship just wasn't right for me in the long run.
And he argues that this synthetic happiness is just as real and valid as natural happiness.
Yes. That is the controversial and brilliant part. We tend to think synthetic happiness is fake, a cheap consolation prize. Gilbert's research shows it is a powerful biological adaptation that allows us to be happy despite outcomes we can't control. It's real.
There is also the spillover effect from the Framingham Heart study. This one really blew my mind. Happiness is literally contagious.
It is, and it's not just your immediate friends. The study found that if a friend who lives within a mile of you becomes happy, your own probability of being happy increases by 25%.
25% is huge.
It's huge, but it extends to friends of friends.
No way.
And to friends of friends. 3 degrees of separation. Your happiness is being influenced by people you have never even met.
That implies a kind of social responsibility, doesn't it? If I'm miserable, I might be booking down my friend's friend's friend.
It certainly suggests that well-being is a collective phenomena, not just a lonely individual pursuit.
Let's broaden the scope now to the philosophical and religious perspectives. I mean, this has been debated for thousands of years. Aristotle had a very specific take on this.
Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia. We translate it as happiness, but a much better translation is human flourishing.
Okay.
And for him, he made this crucial distinction. Happiness is not a feeling, it is an activity.
An activity. How can it be an activity?
He had what's called the function argument. He said, look, the function of a knife is to cut. A good knife is one that cuts well.
Right.
What is the unique function of a human being? For Aristotle, it was reason. So a happy human, a flourishing human, is one who reasons well and acts virtuously over a complete life. It's about doing, not just being.
Now, contrast that with Nietzsche. He was not a fan of the simple pursuit of happiness.
Nietzsche was absolutely scathing. He has that famous quote, "Man does not strive for happiness, only the Englishman does."
At the utilitarians.
A direct shot at Bentham and his followers. Nietzsche believed that striving for mere comfort and happiness was the goal of what he called the last man, a pathetic, contemptible creature who takes no risks.
Wow.
Nietzsche valued struggle, difficulty, and suffering because those are the things that create worth and greatness.
So he thought that seeking happiness was basically settling for mediocrity.
Essentially, yes. He thought we should strive for power, for creation, for overcoming ourselves, even if it makes us miserable in the conventional sense.
Let's turn to the religious views. They all seem to have a different flavor of happiness, but with some common threads.
Buddhism, for instance, views happiness as the result of overcoming craving or attachment. There's a distinction between mundane happiness, like having wealth, and ultimate freedom, which is nirvana.
In Hinduism,
In the Advaita Vedanta school, the ultimate goal is realizing that there is no duality between the individual self, or Atman, and the universe, or Brahman, realizing that connection is the ultimate bliss.
Confucianism seems much more social, more grounded.
Very much so. The Confucian thinker Mencius spoke of the greater self, which is our moral self, versus the lesser self, which is our physiological, pleasure-seeking self. Happiness comes from nourishing that greater moral self through righteous deeds in society.
And Judaism and Christianity also have specific takes on this.
In Judaism, simcha, or happiness and joy, is often viewed as a commandment. It's a duty. Being happy enables you to serve God better.
And Christianity.
Well, particularly in the view of someone like Thomas Aquinas, perfect happiness beatitudo is not actually possible in this life.
So you can't be truly happy on earth.
Not perfectly. For Aquinas, perfect happiness consists of the vision of God in the next life. Earthly happiness is always imperfect and secondary to that ultimate goal.
And Islam has a rich tradition here as well.
It does. The famous scholar Al-Ghazali wrote a book called The Alchemy of Happiness. For him, it's a manual for religious instruction, suggesting that happiness is a kind of spiritual transformation, not just a worldly gain.
It's clear that across history, the wisest minds have seen happiness as something much deeper than just feeling good.
Yes, it's almost always tied to duty or connection or transcendence.
In that definition, what we even aim for, it changes as we age.
It does.
That's the next section in the material's demographics. How does age change what makes us happy?
The research shows a pretty clear evolution. Young adults tend to seek happiness through new interactions, new experiences, a sense of optimism. They're looking forward.
And then middle-aged adults.
The focus tends to shift to more object-based happiness, things like money, career, relationships, providing for a family.
And older adults. There's another shift.
A big one. Because they often perceive life as being more behind them than in front of them, they tend to move away from that tactile, object-based happiness.
So what do they focus on?
Personal peace. Lasting, deep relationships. They are less interested in acquiring new things and more interested in savoring the moments and people they already have.
We also see a major split between individualism and collectivism in how cultures view this.
This is absolutely critical for understanding any of those global happiness surveys. In Western cultures, individual happiness is paramount. It is my pursuit of happiness.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It's right there in the founding documents. But in many Eastern Asian cultures, the focus is often on happiness within the context of relationships and the group.
So personal happiness can sometimes be seen as selfish.
It can even be seen as harmful if it disrupts social harmony. In one culture, sacrificing your own happiness for the good of the group is a tragedy. In another, it can be a source of great virtue and pride.
That is a huge difference. It means in one culture, a happy life is defined by personal achievement I did this.
Right. And in another, it might be defined by social contribution. I supported my family, or I was a good member of my community.
We've covered definitions, measurement, biology, psychology, the paradoxes, philosophy, and culture. It's an incredibly complex picture.
It is. If we were to try and summarize the complexity, we have to admit that happiness is not a single destination you arrive at. It's this shifting blend of our genetics, our circumstances, our choices, and the cultural lens we wear.
And there's that tension we started with, that core conflict between experiencing joy in the moment
The effect.
and evaluating your life as meaningful, the life satisfaction. You can have one without the other, but it seems true flourishing requires some kind of balance of both.
And we must remember the futility of the chase. John Stuart Mill wrote about this. He said that searching directly for happiness often drives it away.
So what did he suggest?
He believed it is best achieved en passant, in passing. You focus on something entirely, a goal, a person you love, an ideal you believe in, and happiness is the byproduct that comes along for the ride.
That seems to be the most consistent thread through all this research. You can't catch it by running directly after it.
You can't. You have to let it catch you while you're busy doing something else that matters.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on. We talked about synthetic happiness. Daniel Gilbert's idea that our brains manufacture happiness when we don't get what we want.
The psychological immune system.
Right. And we usually think of this as a consolation prize, a second best option. But considering how powerful that psychological immune system is it possible that the happiness we stumble upon, or the happiness we build out of our own failures, is actually superior to the happiness we meticulously plan for?
That's a profound question.
Could it be that the unexpected resilience of the human mind is the truest source of our well-being?
It challenges the entire multi-billion-dollar industry of planning for a happy life.
We hope this examination has given you a new framework for understanding your own well-being. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.